Hello and welcome to the Creative Community Podcast. This is the show where we interview and discuss with local creatives and local organisations of Liverpool. I am your host, Claire Bearderaz. I'm a creative freelancer, a spoken word performer and a creative arts therapist. And for today's episode, I am joined by the lovely Ella Fragedy on behalf of Where Are the Girl Bands. Hi Ella.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm really excited to be here. The setup feels so professional. I'm used to doing Zoom interviews for podcasts, so I'm feeling like I'm having my celebrity on a talk show moment.
Is this a step up moment? You're like, I've made it. Here I am.
Very much.
Love to see it. So for those listening, obviously you're your own independent creative, but you're also here with Where Are the Girl Bands. Should we start off with a bit about yourself and what you do independently?
Yeah. Sure. It's always funny, isn't it? Listing all of the labels of the different things that you do. I guess the first thing when I think about myself is that I guess I'm an artist. I graduated last year from Manchester School of Art. I did a degree in fine art. So I have my own art practice, but I also write a lot of poetry and do a lot of sort of community arts things, whether it's independent workshops or the Where Are the Girl Bands work. And I guess my full-time job is also sort of an example of that because I work at Comics Youth. So I feel as a person, I'm just sort of a maker. I'm just always making things, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. I love that idea as well, that you make things. It's so accurate, and I feel like it doesn't box you in some way as well. I know you said that you do a lot of community work yourself, and you also do it with Where Are the Girl Bands. Can you tell me a little bit more about Where Are the Girl Bands and I guess the intention behind?
Of course. So it was set up on Instagram in 2018, and Where the Girl Bands is run by myself and Eve Machin. And at the time we were in a band together called Smallmouth. Nothing happened. The band didn't break up. It's just that we're both. I know, literally, I was we used to be in a band. Eve's in Cambridge, being very clever, so we just literally haven't had the time to practice or be in a band, but in that time Where the Girl Bands completely took off. It started because we were having trouble with finding events basically to perform at in Liverpool. I think both of us felt that we couldn't really name that many women on the local creative scene.
Really true, yeah.
And we were this is an issue obviously with us, but also with the scene, because it wasn't that we weren't attending gigs. We went to a lot of gigs, and we'd grown up going to a lot of gigs, and often it was the same lineups, it was the same structures even of gigs. It was a lot of the same stuff that we were seeing, and we just didn't know where to find other stuff. We were sure that there probably was other stuff out there, but we didn't know how to access it. So we started off the page almost as a way to find people for ourselves, but also for other people, because we thought, if we're having this issue and we're musicians ourselves and we're engaged with the scene, surely other people have that issue too. And also just to sort of start a conversation about why there is that sense of a lack of access to gig spaces, why a lot of people feel unsafe in gig spaces.
Absolutely.
And it's sort of developed over the time. That intention has always been there to basically have a conversation around access, inclusion and safety, but it's evolved from sort of just purely Instagram posts to now we do events, we have our own podcast, we do reviews, we write articles, we have our melodic distraction show. So it's just sort of expanded across a lot of different avenues over the years that we've been running the page.
So I guess it was originally that online community, and like you say, it sort of snowballed from there, and it's grown into this amazing thing. And I think just to touch on sort of the intention behind it as well, I think the fact that it's grown in the way it has shows that there was a clear need for that.
Definitely.
And I think it's great that we have an organisation like Where Are the Girl Bands that can represent a group of people that maybe aren't necessarily heard in the industry, in the music industry as well.
I think something that sort of happened naturally was that the page started acting almost as a directory of local musicians and creatives, to a point where throughout the whole time, even from the very start of having the page, people will often come to us and be look, I want to be better, I want to be more inclusive, can you point me in the direction of some people who might, you know, fit my event well? And something that me and Eve always try and do is give people who are relevant to like the events and the organisations, because often like what happens is that sometimes we get people being like, can you name us 3 women like to go on our show? And we're like, there's literally hundreds, thousands of people who could fit within this event. So what we try and do with the page is like put as many people out there as possible. Something we're really passionate about is that there's not like any bias with who goes on the page. If people message us and ask us for a review, we will do them a review. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no like submission process. It's not music that me and Eve like have found and are like, oh, we like this song. Anyone can go on the page and there's no sort of like filter. Because, you know, there are just so many different musicians of so many different genres. There's so many people in the music scene as well. Like that's something which has really evolved over the years, is that we started off focusing on musicians, whereas now we have a much more cross-discipline approach, because like the creative scene is just cross-discipline in Liverpool anyway. And, you know, there's so much more that goes into gigs than musicians. Obviously musicians are a big part of it, but you know, there's techs, there's promoters, there's venue owners, there's sound engineers, makeup artists. Like there's literally so many different elements of the creative scene. So we like our page to basically be like, people can scroll through it and find people, and if they can't find people, they can come to us and we can point people in the direction of people as well.
That's brilliant. And I think what I love about what you just explained as well is that, like you say, you're not going to be turning anyone down. It's sort of an open dialogue, it's an open space. If someone asks you, can you do a review, you'll happily do it for them. I think that's really important. I know we were just talking about this earlier, about how the industry can be so sort of closed off to people who are maybe up and coming, or even people who have been well experienced in the field, and just it's like, what is it that is stopping it? And it can be so sort of exclusive.
Definitely. And that was the issue for us. We were just like, how, like, where are the opportunities and how do you access them? Like, no one tells you, do you know what I mean, like how to do it. And like often it's something which, I don't know, it's understandable to an extent, where venues and organisers want to go with people who they know will sell tickets, who they've had good experiences with before. And, you know, there's so much pressure, especially for small venues in the city, to pay their bills, to have retention from their audiences. So it makes sense to an extent that venues have, I guess, like safe lists of people who they put on for different events. But obviously that means that like opportunities are distributed to the same people over and over again. And for someone starting out, it's really difficult to like find your way into those different creative circles. So it's really important to us that like we platform people of all experience levels. It's a big part of our like all in the same boat events as well, because we just want to like give just like a shared platform basically for whoever wants to get involved. They can get involved, and you know, bigger artists and smaller artists on the same page I think is so important as well. To like give everyone the same platform and the same sort of support for the work that they're doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, there's always something to learn from each other.
Definitely.
It's not like once you've reached a certain point in your career or you have a certain platform, that's it, right? It's a continuous developing sort of way of being an artist.
Definitely, 100%. It's funny, like I was doing a podcast literally like half an hour ago for our like Safe Spaces podcast that we do in collaboration with Comics Youth, and I was talking to the peer action collective, that's what they're called. And I was speaking to the peer researchers, and they're youth led, and they're doing work around youth violence within Merseyside. And something which we were saying is how like everyone is an expert in their own experiences. And like with creatives, I think that's almost even more so. Something that Emily, who we were talking about before, we've also had a lot of conversations with, where, you know, within the creative industry, experience and sort of like accolades and stuff is often taken into account, but you can never do your own craft wrong. Do you know what I mean? So like true. Everyone is an expert in their own field, because everyone's field is unique, if that makes sense.
And it's easy to forget that, isn't it, when you're so caught up in an industry that's so fast paced, and like you say, it can be so hard to crack at times.
Yeah.
It's hard to not feel like, oh my God, there's like a set way to get to this point. Like I have to follow this and this and this. But you're right.
Yeah.
We are experts in our own creative sort of form.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's interesting because as I mentioned earlier, I'm a creative therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the same concept of when I'm there with a client, they are the expert
Yeah.
in their own experiences and stuff like that. And it's like, well, actually, we can actually take that and apply it to everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's qualitative, right? It's
Definitely.
that sort of thing that is really, really important. I knew you were talking a bit about sort of how you and your sort of co-partner within Wherever the Girl Bands sort of started this up as almost sort of your own experiences
Mm-hmm.
of like, well, where are the girl bands? You know,
Mm-hmm.
what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And you created that platform for yourself, and then it led on to that community.
Mm-hmm.
How has it been navigating that as things have become sort of, you've been gaining more and more traction with it?
Mm-hmm.
Have those experiences that you were having when you first started it, are they still there? Is it hit or miss? What has it been like?
It's funny because when we first started the page, we very much wanted it to be almost anonymous. Like me and
Right.
Eve didn't want to be
Yeah.
like involved at all. The fact that we've started doing like, you know, I guess public appearances
Yeah.
was something which we didn't ever anticipate being involved. It was very much like we wanted it to be a public platform for people to share their experiences and to be on the page, which is still what it is. But I think like the more opportunities we get, it's unavoidable that there's going to be some element of our voice within the platform, because at the end of the day, like I illustrate the page, there's always going to be some element of our, you know, personal touch on the content that we put out. So there's always been like lots of shifting points as we've gone on, where we've had to, you know, readjust how we feel about the page and like what we want it to be and how we want it to function and stuff. And I think when we started, we were definitely coming from a musician's perspective. You know, at that point I was like still at the start of my degree. It was very much just like a passion project, and as it's grown, it's almost like a part-time job at this point in terms of what the workload's like. But I think it's so exciting now because in the time that we've done it, so much has evolved, not only with our project, but with other projects alongside ours. I think when we started, we were like, just come find anything, which really was, you know, elevating people in the way that we wanted to see. Not really even just for ourselves, but just genuinely because we wanted to see other musicians too. And, you know, across the time that we've been doing the page, there have been so many like amazing events, amazing organisations, you know, that we've like either collaborated with or just seen them evolve in what they're doing. I feel like the audience has grown, like the engagement with our page has grown and changed in lots of different ways. And I do feel like the scene is constantly evolving and there's constantly new things like breaking out. And like I had a conversation with Lindsay Price about this, about how there's almost like waves within the local scene of like, it's almost like people come up together, if that makes sense, and like organisations sort of evolve at the same time. And I guess when we started out, there was also like Bitch Palace were just sort of starting out, and they were a bit ahead of us, and we went to them at the very start, and we had like a very sweet like coffee meet up with them, and we were like, they were doing events already, and events were nowhere in our mind at that time. Like we just started the page, and we had a lovely conversation with them where they were sort of like giving us advice, because like we'd had some like weird DMs from people and stuff, and we were like, oh, I feel a bit nervous about this, like, you know, we weren't really sure like the direction we wanted to go with the page and stuff. And that was so lovely that from the very start there were other people like in the creative community who were sort of doing similar things and having similar challenges to us. And they've been a really nice sort of, I don't know, like pinpoint that we could follow through our journey as well, and seeing like what their events have been like and stuff. And, you know, we collaborated with them on Halloween event in October, and that was just such a nice like full circle moment, because we never perceived ourselves as ever doing events, and so it was so nice that like now we've got to this point where a lot of what we do is events, bringing it back around to Bitch Palace, who were like such a like an influence and a grounding point at the start. So it's just constantly shifting and growing, and I never know where it's going to go next. Like things just sort of happen with the project, and we run with it because we're so passionate about it all.
Yeah, and I think what's what's lovely about that is that when you were first starting out, there were people that you could, other organisations that were willing to help you and weren't necessarily like saw you as, I guess, like competition or anything like that.
And it's like very much what our perspective as well is, like the more stuff the better in our opinion. Do you know what I mean? Like the more people who are making safe space events, the more people who are focusing on elevating women in music, the more people who are having conversations around access and inclusivity, the better. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like that would never be like a field of competition. Like, and you learn and grow from each other so much all the time, and there's so much ground to cover even. Do you know what I mean? Like there aren't enough people putting events on, there need to be more. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly,
so like it's exciting, and it's like I would always encourage people to like put their own nights on if they can, if they're interested in it, like starting their own like shows. Like if you're passionate about something, like please like share like your voice and the things that you care about in the scene, because like there can never be too much in my opinion.
There's never going to be a point where there's too many voices where you're going to be like, oh yeah, hang on a minute,
we've reached the limit. Like,
exactly. Because again as well, like those voices continue to develop and evolve, and it's almost like you say, it's like the wave, right? The voices come up together. So there's always something to be said, or something to be said in a different way, or different perspective, or different viewpoint, and it's always like, oh, I never thought about it like that.
100%. Like for International Women's Day this year, we did an event in collaboration with like quite a few other organisations within Liverpool, and it was just so nice because it's like the fact that there are so many other organisations within the city who are focused on like similar things, but we're all doing it in like our own slightly different ways. It's just really nice, and like when those things come together, I don't know, it's just great that there is so much passion within the city. And even just like, you know, there's often so little money involved for people who are putting on events. Like, you know, we work with Bloom Building a lot, and there are loads of other organisations who work with Bloom, and like I feel like we're constantly like learning from them in so many ways. But I think the main thing we learn all the time is just how much people do care, you know, about the communities that they're a part of. Like a lot of it is a lot of work, and it's like a lot of long hours, and people are so passionate and people care so much, and like it's just unbelievably inspiring, honestly. Like, you know, I come away from our events and other people's events and just feel like, I don't know, just like gratitude, I guess, of like being able to be a part of, you know, a city where there are so many people who care so much, if that makes sense.
Of course. And there is something about that, right? Bringing people together from the same community, different organisations, different creatives. It enhances the experience.
Definitely.
Like you say, you leave and then you're left. I always feel really wholesome. My heart feels so full when I leave events that you guys have put on, and it's so nice to have a space where you can connect with others and not feel like you're not allowed to, oh, can I approach this person? Are they going to talk to me?
Exactly. And I think that's it. Like, the way things have manifested is almost exactly like what we were yearning for when we started the page. Like, the issue that we were facing was like, you know, we were feeling unsafe in gig spaces. Like, you know, I think most people have had experiences of like harassment within like gig venues and stuff, and also just that it felt so inaccessible, and we'd had so many experience of like performing at gigs which, you know, we'd been invited to perform at, and being treated like, I don't know, like we weren't allowed to be there even though we were like performing and we were on the lineup. And going from that way, you feel like almost scared actually, like within these creative spaces, to like the way that things are now in the spaces that I access, where I'm like you said, I don't feel like there's anyone in the room who I couldn't go up to and have like a really genuinely like soul nourishing conversation with. It's like the complete antithesis of the spaces that I sort of started out in. And like the fact that there are so many of them and they're growing all the time, it's just like, it genuinely makes me like, I'm really emotional thinking about it, because like it's so needed, it's so necessary, especially for like, you know, people starting out. And even just like my younger sister comes to our events, and like the fact that some of her first gigs have been our gigs is really important to me, because it should set a precedent to her of what other spaces should feel like. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely.
Like, you should always feel comfortable and safe. Like, you know, for me, I can just leave her and know she'll be fine. Do you know what I mean? And that she'll have a really nice time, and that she can feel confident to like go and have a dance and go and talk to people if she wants to. And like, I don't know, I just think that's so important, that people should feel safe and comfortable like entering creative spaces and feel like they belong there.
Yeah, and what they're doing in that space is valid.
Exactly.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to have people sort of waiting for you at the door to, you know, frustrating, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I don't know, there are so many people who have shared negative experiences almost word for word. Like, it's literally wild how many people will say the same like lived experience story, and it's like a few syllables off what someone else has said. Right. And you know, no one should have to feel that way or experience those things. So hopefully, like, there will be a generation of creatives in the city who don't ever have to face those things, because they can find their place within, you know, environments that are really supportive. And then in the future, if they do enter a space that feels unsafe, they'll know that it's the space and it's not them. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. That like a brick wall's been put up. It's not that you're not capable. It's that person's not letting you in. Exactly. And that's so important.
It's empowering to know that there are organisations like Where Are the Girl Bands that are helping to set that precedent for moving forward. So like you say, up and coming creatives, people who are new to the scene, can be like you say, you know, I'm not the problem here.
Exactly.
My work isn't invalid. I'm not talentless, or you know, there's nothing wrong with me or what I'm doing. It's the space.
Definitely.
And that's what it's always been. It's always been that. It's always been the space.
Definitely.
Yeah. I know you mentioned also that Where the Girl Bands do workshops.
Yeah. We do. I mean, a lot of the workshops that we've done have been sort of hosted by other people. It's funny because I do a lot of workshops in my job. Like, it's pretty much what I do day to day. But with girl bands, we like to try and like outsource opportunities as much as we can. So we did a lot at the start of our residency in Bloom Building. So we did like a photography development day. We did a songwriting day. We have done some networking stuff, like we had like a social Sunday thing over Zoom where people could come and just have a chat in the space. And that's something we're really big on, is like having development spaces that feel safe and comfortable too. Because, you know, if someone doesn't feel that they're at the stage of getting on stage yet, they should still have creative spaces that they can access as well, and that are available to them. And the people who've led those workshops have been fantastic at making people feel really comfortable. And like, it's been really lovely for me, because I've seen actually some people who've attended those events have like formed their own like friendship groups and like their own little communities from that. And that's all we could ever ask for. Do you know what I mean? Like, that sort of bringing people together and giving people confidence in what they do. And yeah, it's something we want to do a lot more of this year. I think it's a big intention of ours to like, you know, just give people learning opportunities. Something we're thinking about doing is something in collaboration with Bed and Breakfast, who are a events organisation in Liverpool, and Abby, who runs Bed and Breakfast. We're having a conversation with her about workshops around like the business end of the creative industry, because Abby went to LIPA, has a lot of understanding around things like EPKs, like stuff that I don't even know what the acronyms mean.
You said that, and I was like,
I'm like, let me just Google that really quickly. And me and Eve don't come from that perspective. Like, we come from a very sort of like, we're just passionate about what we're doing. But a lot of the time, there's things that you need to know, especially as you grow as an artist, and like maybe there are contracts involved, like, you know, stuff around fair pay. And so we want to sort of basically set up workshops around the things that people like don't know where to find, like the learning for, even things people don't know about. So the idea is that we'll work with Abby, and Abby has the knowledge, and we'll be like an accessibility check. We'll be like, can you spell out that acronym, please? Like, but we have a lot of ideas about workshops, and I think the more you invite people into spaces, the better. Do you know what I mean? Like, the more you say to people, like, this is a learning space, like, this is a community space, like, the more likely those people are then going to get on stage, like, next time we have an open mic, because they're, like, familiar with being in the environment with other people. So, it's something we're really passionate about.
And again, those workshops that you guys have provided and intend to sort of develop going forward, it sort of reinforces that idea of sort of safe space to explore, safe space to develop, that whole idea again of like some of the events when you do all in the same boat, you know, varied experiences, right, of different artists coming in, and we're all here to learn, you know, always.
Definitely. And like, it's something we preach all the time. It's like the value of like local community and stuff. I think, you know, for a lot of creatives, probably because it's an industry where access to stable income is so rare. There's a lot of like urgency around, I guess, like making it, or like, you know, getting signed, or, you know, getting to a position where you're like a big famous artist and you have that financial security. And obviously that's completely understandable, but me and Eve always try and emphasise like the value of grassroots scenes as well, and like how much you can like gain from the people around you and the creatives around you, and to really like not just set your eye on like London, but to really think about like what there is here. And like, you know, the thing we always say is like the culture happens within grassroots communities. You know, that's where the things which like are making loads of money in London, it's where it's being taken from. Do you know what I mean? Like, so this is the space where those things can happen, and like magic can happen. And, you know, it's a real shame that we're not invested in the way that other cities are, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing to gain from the community here.
I mean, I completely resonate with that, because people often hear that I do creative work and I freelance and things like that. I'm originally from London, so people was like, have you considered like going back to London today? I'm like, well, actually, I enjoy the creative scene that is constantly being developed here. And for me, like you say, I would take real value in the grassroots sort of organisations and concepts that are happening here in Liverpool. So for me to go back to London to sort of continue to do freelance, it wouldn't feel the same. I think I would lose that sense of community. I imagine there are loads of communities in London, and there are plenty of those, but I really value the ones that are forming and that have been here before I even came to Liverpool.
And I think that's the thing, it's like obviously there will be grassroots communities in London too. It's more the sort of concept of London. Do you know what I mean? It's like where the pot of gold is. Do you know what I mean? And like really like the gold lies like in the relationships you form within the communities that you're a part of.
I know you said that you do like a lot of workshops within your job as well, and then you obviously have Where Are the Girl Bands, and you also do illustrations, so there's a lot of different hats that you wear. I'm wondering then, how do you take time for yourself, I guess, for self-care, because there's so much going on?
Honestly, it's something I'm still learning to do. Like, I think it's a funny one, because I think for me, like, the girl band stuff is like such a nourishing thing for me to do anyway. Like the illustration stuff like that, which takes time, but is also just like quite a stress relieving activity for me to do. Like, because there isn't really that much money involved in girl bands as well. I feel like there isn't the same level of pressure of like, you know, within my full-time job. It's still very creative, but there are deadlines I need to hit. There are people who are relying on me. Like, there's a structure of a company around me. Whereas with girl bands, it's if I don't do an illustration that week, nothing happens. Do you know what I mean? It's something that I'm doing for the passion of it and because I enjoy doing it genuinely. So on my commute to work, if I like put my headphones in and listen to someone's new track and write a review and do a drawing off them, that's like actually really enjoyable to me. Do you know what I mean? It's like a nice thing to do. But I think, you know, I won't lie and say that I've got the answers. I don't. I do definitely get burnt out. And like, I think, you know, it's difficult, especially, you know, when you want to do things in an ethical way as well, like finding the time for yourself within all of the other things that you do. It's genuinely really difficult to do. And I think, you know, that work-life balance is something that I definitely struggle with a bit. I think because, like, if we get an opportunity, I never want to say no.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that I need to learn, to maybe sometimes say no to things. I think when you're doing things for other people, it feels really difficult to say no because you feel like you're closing the door for them.
Yeah.
So, like, if an organisation reaches out and they're like, you know, we'd love to, like, platform some of the artists you work with, for me to say no feels like a real disservice to the people we work with. But I guess the thing I need to remember is, like, if I keep saying yes and overworking myself, there will be no opportunities associated with, like, Where Are the Girl Bands if I can't do it anymore. So I think it's something that I'm learning as I go forward. Like, as a person, I function best when I'm really busy, which is probably quite helpful for, like, the organisations I'm a part of. But I think, you know, it's an issue with creatives, isn't it? Because it's like the work-life balance is non-existent, you know, because the work is the life. Like, your work comes from your life comes from your work. Like, the culture that you know, like, the things that you do in your free time are also connected with your work life. Like, it simply isn't a divide. Like, you know, there are people who work in my office building and they're in, like, the legal team in their suits, and I know, like, that work-life divide must be so clear for them. You put your suit on, now you're in work mode, you go and you do your legal things on behalf of other people, you come home, take your brogues off, watch some TV. Whereas for creatives, or, like, people working sort of, I guess, in, like, the charity sector or doing community work, it's all just the same.
There's no clear distinction, is there?
Exactly.
It's very fluid.
Yeah.
Like you say, it's hard to figure out when things start and stop because it's so intertwined. It's dynamic, isn't it?
Exactly. So if anyone has the answers on,
let us know. I would love to know.
Yeah, I will be hitting you up to find those out because I do not know. I do not know.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the topic of self-care, I just think it's such a diverse and continuous sort of discovery, isn't it? There's never going to be one answer for it.
Yeah.
I think it's so funny that I'm a therapist because I think to myself sometimes, maybe I should listen to myself sometimes, right? It's so easy for us to just say, you know, I do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, actually self-care is quite a tricky thing to navigate.
It definitely is. Yeah. And it's a lot of work. And I think, like, sometimes things that work for other people won't work for you. Like, so I really genuinely find, like, days off quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because, like, I don't know what to do with myself. Yeah. Like, I'm not someone really who finds, I don't know, like, the idea of relaxation for me is genuinely, like, drawing or doing something else. So, like, sometimes I'll try and force myself to, like, do things that I think should be self-care, but actually they're not self-care for me. Yeah. You know, things that are self-care can be really practical things. They can be things like packing my bag the night before. So, like, in the morning, I'm not, like, running around the house. And I think, like you said, it's a constant discovery of yourself and, like, what you need rather than, like, basing it off, like, I guess, Instagram infographics of, like, I'll put on a face mask and I'll run a bath and I'm, like, sat in the bath, like, overheating, like, is this right? Like, am I doing it right? Like, and, like, I don't know, the older I guess it's just, like, actually looking after myself and maybe, like, bulk cooking my meals at the start of the week, so that it's, like, boring practical things I found that have been really helpful, literally. But that is boring and difficult, and, like, sometimes you don't have time for it. But you know, it's different for different people, and I guess, like, I do try and make sure I have time in the day for myself. Like, I do, like, morning pages in my journal every day. You know, I make sure that I'm, like, self-regulating and that I'm doing things which are helpful for me to calm down. Like, I make sure that I make time for my own creative practices as well, although that's definitely something I want to try and learn to balance better as well. I think, you know, I have definitely neglected my own practices a bit over the past year, but like you said, it's constantly a discovery and you're just learning. You know, sometimes I don't know, like, your goals and the things that make you feel good do just evolve. Like I said, when we started Girl Bands, it was from a musician perspective. I don't have that perspective. I wouldn't label myself as a musician anymore, really, because, like, you know, I play a bit of music for fun, but I don't really have any drive to, like, perform as a musician anymore. Like, the things that, like, make me feel really passionate now are, like, community work, or even just, like, the illustration side of Girl Bands. Like, I find that really rewarding, I guess, like, building the sort of, like, brand around the organisation. And, you know, if that makes me happy, that's what's making me happy right now. I need to
Yeah.
remind myself of that. I don't have to like tick boxes of like what I think I should be doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Side note, I love your illustrations. I was literally
thank you.
in Melodic Distraction this week, and I saw like an illustration you did for them, and I was like,
so sweet.
Emma did that. Like, there's something so distinct about your illustrations that I can point it out. And I'm like,
that's so nice.
But you guys should definitely check out Where Are the Girl Bands on their Instagram, and Ella's illustrations are amazing for sure. But I did have a question about Where Are the Girl Bands. I know you said that it's sort of constantly growing and it's sort of it's been quite fast paced, I guess, in the way it's been happening, which is lovely in many ways. Where do you see Where Are the Girl Bands going? Like, any future plans? And you said you were developing workshops and things like that.
I think, you know, me and Eve have a million ideas.
Yeah.
Like, whenever me and Eve, like, I rarely see her in person because she's in Cambridge, and then, you know, we're both so busy, but whenever we like meet up for a Zoom call, it's like 5 hours long. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're just talking and talking and talking, and there's so many different ideas of like pathways it could go down, and especially when Eve leaves uni and she has more time, because this year she's, you know, had to like take her hands off the project a bit more because, you know, she's in her final year, and so I think once she graduates there'll be more conversations as well about like where things can go. But I think the things that we've found that work really well, that we feel like we want to develop further, is definitely that sort of like workshop element. You know, we've really enjoyed doing the events. Something that we also like find quite valuable is, I guess, like consultancy for other organisations or institutions. Like, you know, we've had a few conversations with, say, like charities involved with musicians, and being able to point out to them maybe like areas in which their charity work doesn't reach people within our communities, or, you know, things which are specific to like the Northwest or Liverpool that maybe they haven't thought about, because a lot of these organisations aren't based here. And that's something that we're really passionate about and want to keep doing. But really our main goal at the moment, I guess, is sort of like legitimising ourselves as a company and like the back end of stuff, which is funny because I literally just said before, like, what I find freeing about Girl Bands is that it isn't a company. But I think like something that's really important for us is ethical practice, and at the moment we can't fully have ethical practice because we don't know how to do things properly, if that makes sense. Like, you know, the way that we pay artists is like we equally distribute the money. Like, me and Eve have never taken any money from events, like it's all been unpaid, so we just pass it out to the artists. But that's not logistically sustainable. The bigger that we get as an organisation, we want to make sure that our back end is set up of the company, and that it's ethical and the right processes are in place, that we can offer artists contracts, that they can feel covered by us, that we have proper, you know, policy in place. And those are things that me and Eve don't know how to do, and we will only know by like learning them, by taking courses and stuff. And it's just literally finding the time amongst everything else to do that. So the workshops that we're thinking of doing with Abby, we think are really important because there are so many people in that position, like in the local scene, where like they're so passionate about what they do, but they've never had like an education around it. It's all stuff that they've just figured out themselves. So for us, like, you know, we want to get our website properly figured out. We want to sort out our banking. Like, we just want to learn how to do things ethically and properly, and make sure that the artists we work with are treated to the standard that they should be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I feel like you guys will be a great example to other organisations, other grassroots sort of organisations as well. Because like you said, you know, being new to the scene and then you're handed a contract in like, I don't know if this is right, I'm just going to sign it because it's work. And and then like, no, there's no one there to tell you like, actually that what they're saying is like this and this means that, and you know. So it's great that you guys are going to hopefully be providing those resources for people where it seems a bit inaccessible sometimes to get help.
And it's like, how are we meant to write a contract for someone if we can't read them ourselves? Do you know what I mean? And I think like, you know, Abby from Bed and Breakfast does it really well with her events. Like, you know, her artists have like riders, and they have like, you know, set terms and conditions for their performance and stuff. And smaller artists should be treated with the same level of like respect and professionalism as like, you know, big artists who are doing like worldwide tours should be treated. And like at the moment we ourselves just don't have the resources to do that, but it's something we think is really integral and necessary actually for us to have as we start getting more opportunities, and maybe as more money starts coming in, because the bigger events, the more finances are involved. And you know, I actually don't feel like, I don't know, like I want to know how to do it ethically and responsibly. So that's a big thing that we're focusing on this year, is maybe taking a step back from like snowballing the project and just pausing at this point and making sure we've got all of our processes in place.
Got you. I had one final question.
Okay.
What advice would you give to someone who might be listening to this episode, might be thinking to themselves, you know, I don't have a safe space where I am right now. Maybe they're in Liverpool, maybe they're not, and they don't know how to navigate themselves. What sort of advice would you say? Because I know you sort of started Where Are the Girl Bands on that similar basis.
I think it's a difficult one, but often if there isn't a space, try and make it if you can, if you have the resources too. Alternatively, I do feel like online often there is the opportunity to find networks of people who are doing those things. Like I think when me and Eve started out, we felt like there was nothing, and actually there were loads of people who were doing those things. So if you feel in a hopeless place with like the people you're meeting, with the like venues you're going to, with that sort of thing, it's probably likely that there are safe spaces out there and that you've just not found them yet. And obviously that's not anyone's fault. Like these things are sometimes hard to find. But I guess like, you know, maybe just do a bit of digging in your local scene and talk to people and see where people have had good experiences. And, you know, just more than anything, if you have a bad experience, really remember that it's not you. Like, that's not an issue with you. If you're constantly coming up against brick walls, don't take that as, like, you're not good enough for those spaces. If you don't feel comfortable in a space, that space isn't good enough for you. Do you know what I mean?
Period.
And so either make it yourself or try and find somewhere that deserves you to exist in, basically.
I love that. We just want to say thank you for your time today, Ella. I really appreciate it. I feel like there's been some really interesting points raised, and it's been lovely to hear more about Where Are the Girl Bands, because obviously I've been involved with your sort of events before, but it's nice to hear sort of where you guys have come from and the future plans, which are really exciting as well. So yeah, thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really nice.
Oh, thanks. So if you have enjoyed today's episode and you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up. It helps us know if you're enjoying our episodes, and if you want to see more, of course. Be sure to subscribe, because you have plenty more episodes coming your way. If you are listening to this without any video, that means you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Music or something like that. So just so you know, there is a video version available if you do want to see our beautiful faces. But of course, if you're watching us in person, there's also an audio version, so be sure to check that out as well. Thank you to the LVP Online for allowing this podcast to take place, for all the resources and the support around it. It's really appreciated. If you want to follow me on any of my social medias, I am at Claire Beardraz on all of them, and you can keep up to date in any future projects that I have coming up. And I think that's everything. Thank you again, Ella, for coming, and hopefully see you guys in the next episode.